and we got to make sure. We got to go check the tweets and see if everyone's tweeting in a bunch of tweets as usual. Indeed, they are. So we will go through those. Before we do, we will go through the top headlines as we always do. As soon as you hear that sound, and as soon as I pin the live stream to the top tweet, so you can have that. There you go. Okay, I'm ready. You ready, Cheryl?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, I need the keystroke for the air horn. Pierre has it. There's my new feature request. Here we go. Air horn. There we go.
Okay.
So Apple sues the NSO. Well, and this is funny. So about an hour ago, when I was waking up here in Stockholm, I got a direct message from our friend Ken, who joins us in the audience. And Ken says, if this isn't in your news feed of your top news, you might want to reconsider, your news, your source of your news. And he shared this story I'm about to share, and it's the top story in my news feed. Ken, he's not here to hear that, but I'm sure he'll be glad to know that this is the
He's
top.
serious about this.
Yes, he's right. This is the most important news story of the day, and it's from the New York Times and many others. Apple itself, which is the real source of the news, we might as well go there rather than read attempted regurgitations of it. The BBC, the Times of Israel, The Guardian, Vice, CNET, Associated Press, Fast Company, etc., are all covering this very big story that Apple is suing the NSO group in U.S. federal court, seeking to ban NSO from using Apple products and alleging that NSO illegally targeted Apple users with surveillance tools. And that's an interesting point. But I don't. This is going to get very interesting because they know what they're doing is totally illegal. So how do you sue somebody who's doing something that they know is illegal? Apple, I guess it would make it illegal for American. I mean, everyone who's paying for it as a customer knows it's illegal.
Well, it's a lawsuit in the state of California.
Yeah,
And I don't believe NSO Group operates in California.
that too. Apple accused NSO Group, the Israeli surveillance company, of flagrant violations of its software. Yeah, you can say that. They're giving you a free proctology exam every morning when you wake up, against even though you're begging them not to. Yeah, you could call that a flagrant violation, as well as federal and state laws. Yep. Yeah, and they know that. So I'm trying to think of a suitable analogy. I mean, for those who don't know, NSO Group is the makers of Pegasus. Pegasus is a piece of software that gets into your iPhone without you knowing it and makes everything on your phone knowable to the person who infected your phone. And NSO Group says we only sell Pegasus to governments, not to individuals. And the cost is about $10 million per year for a license. And it's assumed, although pretty not difficult to put the dots together, that the Pegasus was used by one of the Middle Eastern governments, it seems Saudi Arabia, based on the data, that had put an end to Jeff Bezos's marriage because they got into Jeff Bezos's phone and got his personal information and photos. That's just a little aside, a little inside baseball that the journalists haven't figured out yet. But make no mistake, though the country who hacked Jeff Bezos' phone, no, that's illegal to hack Jeff Bezos' phone. People using Pegasus, no, it's illegal. People paying for Pegasus, they know it's illegal. Pegasus knows it's illegal. Pegasus is, they're under no confusion about the legality of their product and service. I guess it is kind of interesting that it's an Israeli company trying to function like, plain old regular company.
Hey,
Apple,
Tyler,
yes.
I think It's a subsidiary of a Luxembourg company
Okay.
called OSY Technologies, and they have a North American subsidiary called Westbridge, or used to, anyways.
Okay. So the story reads: Apple sued NSO Group, the Israeli surveillance company. Yeah. Well, you bring up a great point, Greg. I mean, they might be Israeli founders and team members based in Tel Aviv, but they might technically be a registered company in Liechtenstein or wherever, right? And that has some bearing legally. Another setback for a beleaguered firm and the unregulated spyware industry. The lawsuit is the second of its kind. Facebook sued NSO in 2019 for targeting its WhatsApp users, because that's one of the ways it gets into the phone is through WhatsApp. And another consequential move by a private company to curb invasive spyware by governments and the companies that provide their spy tools. Apple, for the first time, seeks to hold NSO accountable for what it says was the surveillance and targeting of Apple users. Apple also wants to permanently prevent NSO from using any Apple software, services, or devices, a move that could render the company's Pegasus spyware product worthless. Nicole, and now I'm speaking to the journalist who wrote this, you seem to fail to misunderstand. Apple isn't willingly letting them do this, right? And if Apple could stop them, they would, Nicole. You're implying that Apple's moves are going to stop, legal moves are going to stop Pegasus. That's not how it works in hacking. So Apple also wants to permanently prevent NSO from using any Apple software. Yeah, I'm sure they would love that. Services or devices. Yeah, you can't touch our... Hey, NSO, you're not allowed to touch our phones anymore. We just said so. And that move of Apple declaring that you're not allowed to touch our services or devices could render the company's spyware product worthless. Yes, Nicole, theoretically, if Pegasus said, oh, shoot, you don't want us to do this? Oh, well, shit, why didn't you just tell us? Oh, Jesus Christ. Tim, I'm so sorry. Wow, this whole time we thought you were totally okay with this. Why didn't you just say so, brother?
I think that's actually the assumption, is that if you do not file, you have tacit agreement that it's okay.
I love it. And that could render the whole company worthless. By Tim saying, you know what, guys, I've been thinking about this. I'm not so sure I like you hacking all of our devices. Apple is also asking for unspecified damages for the time and cost to deal with what the company argues is NSO's abuses of its products. Apple said it would donate the proceeds from those damages to organizations that exposed spyware. Since NSO's founding in 2010, its executives have said they sell spyware to governments only for lawful interception. But a series of revelations by journalists and private researchers have shown the extent to which governments have deployed NSO's Pegasus spyware against journalists, activists, and dissidents. Apple executives described the lawsuit as a warning shot to NSO and other spyware makers. Quote, this is Apple saying, if you do this, if you weaponize our software against innocent users, researchers, dissidents, activists, and journalists, Apple will give you no quarter. Ivan Kristek, head of Apple Security Engineering and Architecture, said in an interview on Monday. Wow.
There's a reason Apple is doing, though. Why is Apple doing it?
Let's find out. But breaking news, Apple doesn't like it when all of their devices are utterly hacked and owned and your security is zero. Absolute zero. That their whole mantra for the past decade that they've spent tens of millions of dollars trying to hypnotize you into thinking that you have privacy and security are worthless. They don't like that. Really? They don't like being exposed as a complete and utter sham? They don't like that? I'm really surprised.
I think like 2 weeks ago, we had this news that the United States courts said the WhatsApp, so you can say it's Meta, can sue NSO group over the alleged targeting. So I think maybe that's one of the reasons Apple followed that, because the WhatsApp, they've been trying to sue NSO for a while. And I believe it's 2 weeks ago. Yeah, the court said
Oh,
accept this case. Yeah, I think
check
that's
this out. So NSO responds. Thousands of lives were saved around the world thanks to NSO Group's technologies used by its customers, an NSO representative said on Tuesday. Pedophiles and terrorists can freely operate in technological safe havens, and we provide governments the lawful tools to fight it. Oh, now they're bringing in the pedophiles, as usual. Oh, okay, Apple. So you don't like our app that stops pedophiles? Are you pro-pedophiles, Apple? I love how it's gone from Nazis to pedophiles, where the default, you know, evil assumption is, oh, you love not. Oh, are you a Nazi? Do you love Nazis? And now it's like, oh, are you a pedophile? We've Nazism has no, is no longer the default, ultimate character assassination. Too funny.
This reminds me of the Blackwater story, the American military contract story from the Iraq War. And you can just imagine that first of all, this is a good thing that Apple's doing, but this software should be illegal. But I can just imagine that this parasite NSO group is going to morph and rebrand and change countries and what have you.
Of course. Mm.
They had a very well-crafted reply.
Pardon me while I inhale a cookie here. The NSO group has dealt with a series of critical setbacks. This month, the Biden administration, in a notable breach with Israel, blacklisted NSO and Conductor, another Israeli surveillance company, saying they supplied spyware to foreign governments that used it to target the phones of journalists, dissidents, human rights activists, and others. The ban from Biden against Pegasus, which means that no American organization can work with NSO, is the strongest step any American administration has taken to bring the global marketplace for spyware to heel. The Israeli government approves any sale of NSO's software to foreign governments and considers the software a critical foreign policy tool, is lobbying the United States to remove the ban on NSO's behalf. NSO has said it would fight the ban, but the executive set to take over NSO Group quit after the business was blacklisted, the company said. 1 week after the federal ban, the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit rejected NSO's motion to dismiss Facebook's lawsuit. The Israeli firm had argued that it, quote, could claim foreign sovereign immunity. A 3-0 decision by the court rejected NSO's argument and allowed Facebook's lawsuit to proceed. Those developments have helped pave the way for Apple's lawsuit against NSO on Tuesday. Apple first found itself, that's why they waited. I was wondering why they were waiting, and they were waiting to see what was going to happen with Facebook's lawsuit. And now that that's gone through, now they're like, okay, well, then we can do it too. But there was not much point in having two going simultaneously when the first one hasn't been decided if it's possible to go through. Apple first found itself in NSO's crosshairs in 2016 when the researchers at Citizen Lab, a research institute at the University of Toronto, blah, 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 and the company is at risk of default. Moody's, the rating agency, warned. Moody's downgraded NSO by 2 levels. Are we rating hacking outfits now? Is it only a matter of time before a hacking team does an IPO?
Black hat, good housekeeping, seal of approval.
NSO's spyware gave its government clients access to the full contents of a target's phone. allowing agents to read a target's text messages, emails, phone records, capture sounds and footage off their cameras, and trace the person's whereabouts. Everything. Internal NSO, and it turns out Apple doesn't like this. The headline today is Apple suing them about this because apparently they're not happy about it. Go figure. Internal NSO documents leaked to the New York Times in 2016 showed that the company charged government agencies $650,000 to spy on 10 iPhone users, along with a $500,000 setup fee. Government agencies in the United Arab Emirates and Mexico were among NSO's early customers, the documents showed. Those revelations led to the discovery of NSO's spyware on the phones of human rights activists in the Emirates and journalists, activists, and human rights lawyers in Mexico, even their teenage children living in the United States. In the case of the United Arab Emirates, even the king's daughter. NSO said it would investigate any accusations of abuse, but further revelations showed that it did not stop those governments from continuing to misuse NSO's spyware. An opening for Apple's lawsuit emerged in March when Pegasus spyware was discovered on the phone of a Saudi activist. And then they say how it gets installed without even a click. The spyware could invisibly infect iPhones, Macs, Apple Watches, and then siphon the data back to government servers without the target knowing about it. And that's pretty much it. Okay, there you go. You've been sued.
So on the line about Israel viewing it as an important tool of their foreign policy, I just have to reference the Inslaw case from the, I guess, late 80s, where there was a software firm that had been writing software for U.S. intelligence agencies to handle intelligence information, and they had been giving it to other governments. And the CIA, of course, put a back door in it so that they could, peruse all of the information that other governments were gathering. And somewhere in the story, apparently, the Israelis put a back door in the CIA's back door, and I really have to wonder if something similar goes on. It would be unsurprising, actually, if it didn't.
Right. That's where I'm
That's
getting.
exactly what I was. Yeah.
Right. Well, even more so in the Washington D.C. Perspective, being strong kind of military intelligence allies with Israel. If Israel says, "Well, this is one of our most important tools, in our defense, our sovereign defense of our nation," U.S. politicians are then caught in a pickle, and Israel might be telling America, "Oh, don't come after us on this. We don't want you to go after us on this." And then the politicians in the U.S. are like, "Ah, shit." And then that might be why the politicians might say, "Oh, shit, we can't go after Israel on this. But hey, Apple, you should go after them separately because we as politicians, our hands are tied." And when we were reading the article, that point about how it just passed the 3-0, which opened the door for Facebook's suit to go through, that opened the door for Apple to go through. This is where I would love to get a deep insider of Washington, D.C. To share some thoughts about how this is likely to play out. It's going to, I guess America has banned it. I get, and the ban currently still stands. It would be interesting to see how this plays out, because I think worst case, if Apple, I don't even, can they sue for, even if they sue for damages, whatever, the company will just disappear. And make no mistake, the entire company is built on a tiny little app, a tiny little piece of code. That piece of code can relocate to Moldova tomorrow. and it will.
Don't you think it's also a way for, you've got this sanctions thing from the US that can apply anywhere in the world, provided that you do a transaction in dollars, for instance. Even if you don't operate in the US, you can. There's this notion of extraterritoriality. I don't know if you say that in English, but they can go abroad and get you. And if Apple wins, and don't you think that would be a good excuse for the US to apply sanctions to foreign countries who would, who they could prove are using the software?
So what happens if it's upheld that Apple wins this suit, and then they can tell NSO what you're doing is illegal, and then, hey, Israel, you're using illegal tactics, and da da da. And will there be some pressure on Israel to shut it down? Maybe so. The best that will do is force that tiny little piece of code that they built that company on to relocate somewhere with a new name, take their client's phone book with them, and say, hi, with some new voice. Hello, sir. You used to use Pegasus, yes? Oh, yes. Okay, good. Yes, I found your number in a bathroom wall somewhere in Mogadishu. Listen, maybe you like to try. I hear they shut down. Maybe you like to try our new service called Unicorn, Flying Unicorn. Are you interested in the Flying Unicorn app? Maybe we can set you up with a special discount. I see you started using Pegasus on March 27, 1987. And you used it until 2 days ago at 7 p.m. So listen, maybe we can get your account set up in about 10 seconds. Would that be interesting to you, sir? No, this is not no, we are not Pegasus. This is not NSO Group. We are a Moldovan company, my friend. Do you like pierogies? Listen, we can get you set up in 10 minutes. So what good is this going to achieve when they can just do whack-a-mole and reappear in Moldova and service their clients again there? Do you think their clients are going to tell Apple, hey, Apple, you'll never guess who called me. They said they were from Moldova, and they offered me pierogies, but I'm pretty sure it's the Israelis. You think they're going to do that?
But do you think Apple are that stupid?
No, of course Apple knows that's going to happen. So what's the point of this?
Well, the point is that there is a point. We don't get it, obviously, but there is one.
Yeah.
Probably information that they can get through discovery might figure into it.
Yeah.
So in terms of like the successors, if anybody's interested in this topic, they can go to Wikipedia and search Unit 8200, which is the unit of the IDF that does such electronic intelligence. And at the bottom of it, there's a list of companies founded by alumni, of which NSO is one, but there are like 50 or 80 of them. So that's the successor, most likely.
Okay.
Well, Tyler, what they could get by filing is that, first of all, they take steps to make the activity illegal. And knowingly doing something illegal is a different deal than doing something assuming it's legal. Second, they put them on notice so that when they can do claim construction, they can, in fact, treble damages because now you're willfully ignoring the order of the court and such. Then they get discovery. So I think the game definitely shifts, not to mention the potential kind of national sanctions and stuff and kind of diplomatic challenges that has been mentioned. So I think, the armies of lawyers at Apple do know what they're doing, and I think this is an interesting step that they've taken.
It sets an interesting legal precedence as well, which is if you write, or as somebody says on Twitter, anytime licensed software is hacked, the licensor can sue, claiming that the licensor itself has been hacked, and it's going to set an interesting legal precedence that the Apple is. So I guess we need new laws around hacking and even doing penetration tests and even looking for vulnerabilities. And what are the penalties for that?
I think it's a broader trend that, I mean, we need to move towards sovereign computing and a more distributed system. And this is just going to start, it's part of a bigger picture of hardening all of these endpoints and getting away from centralized systems, I think. But there's also a lot of more companies. I mean, there was a Swedish company here in the news last night that is, similar to this NSO group, has similar software. There's probably half a dozen of these companies. So it will be good if both governments and corporations start cracking down on this stuff and make it more difficult for them to spread their software.
I think that, a potential troublesome use of this is if it becomes part of cyber warfare, such as attacks on infrastructure, as a way of gaining access. And I think a legal precedent would be interesting if something like that ever happened and there were damages and torts.
Okay. Then, well, the next article says, it's from Apple. It says, Apple plans to notify targets of state-sponsored spyware attacks, and they name NSO, and commits $10 million to cyber surveillance researchers and advocates, which seems a little bit like a PR move, honestly. But, okay. So they're going to start notifying, you've been hacked. You've got mail. You've been hacked.
I think that's definitely smacks of reclaiming their security credentials.
Right.
That obviously have been damaged.
Well, how long have they known that Jeff Bezos was hacked without notifying him?
Yeah, good question.
Yeah, so Edward Snowden says on Twitter, software giants who have seen the commercial malware targeting their users should look at this as a template for imposing consequences on this predatory industry. The quote-unquote business of human rights violations as a service must be stamped out before it grows. Okay. Internal email chain shows over 600 Google employees have signed a document opposing Google's vaccine mandate, which Google says it firmly stands behind. And this is round 2 of the entitled employee young folks who think that signature collections, that they work at a democracy, who think corporations are democracies. Yeah, well, here's what's like. I'm realizing now, Google's not going to cave on this issue with these 600 employees signing this document. And I wonder how many more signature collections will be shot down before people stop doing signature collections. And then how many of those 600 will resign, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm starting to think this might be just a temporary scenario as we get a new generation of people entering the workforce that think that this is a usable strategy against a company with 100,000 people. Anyone have a take on this one?
I completely agree with you. I think it's a total waste of time, and 600 is way too few. If they had like 20,000, maybe.
Right, but if it doesn't, I think they need to be aware that every time they do one of these, if they don't win, they lose, meaning it establishes that the company is the boss if you don't win in your signature collection.
Hi, Annika here. Maybe I have a too Nordic perspective.
I was about to say.
But, yeah,
no, but let me paint the context first. in Sweden, and it's one of the beautiful things about Sweden, by the way, is the companies from the beginning, from the founders themselves of it, the default is that we are a democracy. That's how we operate through this consensus process. We've even demonstrated it live on stage, where we had one of my dearest friends, Lisa from Doberman, which she sold her agency to EY, and now she's the head of innovation for EY, came on stage. We debated this out, and it's a very beautiful thing, the way that the Swedes are a democracy. And in Sweden, there would be no need for a signature collection, because it would just be brought up during the coffee break that here's what I think, and they would just have a vote, like right then and there, that day, about it. And it's a much more democratic consensus process. But I just wanted the non-Swedes to get the cultural background. Annika, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm questioning also, I mean, a big company like Google when it comes to worker liability. I mean, if you allow a lot of unvaccinated people, wouldn't the company then, especially when it comes to US liability laws, be liable for any death or sick,
Good point.
prolonged sickness and so on, when it comes to, I mean, they have 100,000 workers, so
Right.
that may be a lot of liability.
Yeah, they
Thanks.
might need to take the legal safe route of saying, look, we took every precaution possible to protect everybody here, so you can't sue us if you got sick at work, for example. Because this is just highlights the highly litigious nature of Americans again. But the
Well,
yeah,
Tyler, that's why some of the companies were waiting for Biden. So Biden finally acted. So they're going to use that as a cover that Biden told us it's now an OSHA regulation, so we
right,
required it. So
right, right.
Yeah,
And
and
I
that's
should, yeah, so go on, please, I can wait.
that's the futility of this thing. It's a federal regulation at this point, and there are other factors that are going to come into play. Even or if Apple could give into them, Google could give into them, there would be other factors that would come into play, like insurance costs and covering their own responsibility for testing and things like that have cropped up in other places.
So
I just wanted to comment on Tyler's democracy principle in Sweden as well. There are now a COVID certificate law coming in from December 1st for any big events and similar
100 people or more, yeah.
open. Yeah, so and it's creeping into workforce as well, especially within healthcare and elderly care. So it's coming because we do have one part of sort of alternative people who don't want to get vaccinated because they don't believe in COVID or vaccines. And then we have a large part of especially immigrants working in elderly care who don't want to get vaccinated for various conspiracy theory reasons. So it will come, I think, in the healthcare, and it's a very strong public opinion demand for that, because you obviously don't want to go to the hospital and get COVID. Thanks.
Google leadership faces the challenge of balancing a contingent of its workforce that refuses to get vaccinated while simultaneously trying to win healthcare deals. And that's a great point. They're trying to become a big healthcare company and partner with healthcare companies. And now they've got that internally might be the most embarrassing aspect of this headline. After having meetings with healthcare companies and their team members are refusing to get vaccinated. So this one, I think we understand that one. That's a pretty simple headline. Oh shoot, I just closed the wrong tab. So let's get it back open. Here we go. Next one up is Samsung says it will build a $17 billion factory in Taylor, Texas. 1,200-acre chip factory, operational in the second half of 2024 and roughly 30 miles away from Austin, where it already has an Austin factory. creating another 1,800 jobs in the city of Taylor, which historically they would have built this in Austin, but Austin's getting is just one of the fastest, if not exactly the fastest growing city in America. And now it's spreading to other beyond Austin's borders into Taylor, Texas, which you need to do if you want. I don't think you could build a 1,200 acre chip factory in Austin. You're going to have to go to another county to achieve that. So the next one is that the Constitution DAO's organizers, Vice is still ringing this onion. The Constitution DAO's organizers say that the project has run its course and will shift its Discord channel into read-only mode in 2 weeks. The attempt by crypto fans to buy a copy of the Constitution has been defined by chaos since it failed. Now it's dead. And Constitution DAO Twitter account says, the past 10 days have been an incredible experience. We're so honored and appreciative to have shared it with all of you, our Web3 community. We know that everyone is eager to hear that what's next, and we've been deeply exploring many options. And let's see if there's a... It says, ultimately, we've come to the decision that continuing on without the unifying mission of buying the Constitution, setting up more official governance, and embarking on a new chapter is not something that we as a core team are able to support. This was taking into account the technical and administrative requirements of trying to embark on a new chapter properly. Given this, we believe this project has run its course and we as a community have accomplished what we set out to do. The Constitution DAO community has taken all actions that it was organized to accomplish. We raised capital, we bid at Sotheby's, and upon losing, we made full refunds available to the community as promised. At this time, we want to encourage anyone who has been waiting to claim their refunds to do so. There's no time limit on claiming these refunds. This project was a landmark event. We made history and showed the entire world that a group of internet friends can use the power of Web3 to face a seemingly insurmountable goal and achieve incredible results on an impossible timeline. We hope this project will inspire others to build together and use the power of Web3 to make a positive impact on the world. We love you all and truly humbled to have been part of this history together.
What was the percent of money returned after the gas fees? Does anyone know?
It would depend on the amount contributed. If you contributed less than $200, you basically don't get anything back. The gas would eat it.
So there's no second project. It's just going to be a pure refund.
Correct.
Oh, I see.
So the Spotify and then the Vice, maybe the one useful data point that came out of the Vice article was they estimated, although I'm highly skeptical of any of their estimates, that 50% of people contributed less than 200, which means half of people don't get any of their money back. That resonates with me with my own assumptions, but that's purely all I have, and I think they could look at the data, so they might actually have done the investigation to inquire into the math of it, and they could be right, and it wouldn't surprise me if that was correct. That half of people contributed less than 200, and hence they won't get anything back.
Dubious speculators get bitten by the cobra.
Yeah. Spotify debuts Netflix Hub, collecting official soundtracks, playlists, and podcasts for top Netflix content in 7 countries. This is super cool. What a brilliant idea. Looking for the soundtrack from your favorite Netflix show? Now it will appear. Now it will be easier to find thanks to an expanded partnership between Netflix and Spotify. Official soundtracks, playlists, and podcasts for top Netflix content. And then I wonder if that partnership could go bidirectionally, such that, for example, if Spotify's hosting these playlists of podcasts or whatever, so you have artists in Spotify, you could have shows, like, for example, you type in Squid Game and then you come to the Squid Game Spotify page, and on the Squid Game page, is all of the music from Squid Game, a whole bunch of podcasts about Squid Game, etc. Yada 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 yada. Now that's one way where content about Netflix, or in some sense from Netflix, in the case of the music or audio, is being hosted on Spotify for Spotify users inside the Spotify app. But could those playlists then be embedded into the Netflix app directly, natively, so that you never need to leave Netflix? So you have the Squid Game show, and then there's a little icon that shows a little music note, or a little audio like icon, and when you click on that, it opens inside Netflix without ever leaving Netflix, an embed of the Squid Game page from Spotify inside Netflix. The content's hosted by Spotify, but you're viewing it inside Netflix, similar to a YouTube embed in another person's web page, for example. That could be incredibly cool, because then you're in
Why
Netflix.
don't they just merge?
Yeah,
They could just merge.
well, they're both adding multimedia, as it used to be called in the old days. For example, Spotify is going to continue to add more video. Netflix is going to continue to add, and may potentially go into podcasts. It wouldn't shock me.
Right, it's all content at the end.
Right. So next up is Reddit is shutting down the Dubsmash app on February 22nd after acquiring it last December, as the Dubsmash team adds video creation tools to Reddit's main app. Right. Here comes social shopping on Reddit, by the way. They'll come in last. They'll be the last one to wake up to it, but they'll get there. They're essentially they're watching what's happening with TikTok, and they want a piece of that because a lot of they realize when people are using the Reddit mobile app, heaven forbid you stumble upon a viral TikTok video. Next thing you know, you're just swiping through endless TikTok videos, and they see that and they think, oh, wait a minute, why don't we make it easy for people to make little videos? And then they bought Dubsmash, and it's going to make Reddit a bit more TikTok-ish, which honestly makes quite a bit of sense. If they could make a hybrid of Reddit and TikTok, would be a very compelling offering. By the way, I just had a startup pitch me yesterday. Brilliant concept. And forgive me for this, is just a little inside window into my calendar. And it was a gentleman from Germany. It was an unusual pitch, and he started the pitch by saying, right at the beginning, that this is about an adult content startup. I said, okay, so he's got me ready so I wouldn't be shocked with whatever came next on slide 2. And essentially, it's his stated problem, which is a good way to start any pitch deck. And the problem is young people are not dating and not having sex. I was like, wow, you got my attention. We talk about this all the time, like the declining birth rate. And there is a huge decline in dating and a huge decline in young people having sex, and on and on and on. And he was making the point that, and he was addressing this kind of from the male side, that porn isn't an actual real solution to this problem, that it even exacerbates the problem, but it doesn't solve the problem. I was like, again, I really like where you're going with this. So it turned into a really interesting conversation. And one of the points was, for example, what was it called? We had a couple of really interesting brainstorms around how to solve that problem that out of respect for him, I'm not going to reveal just yet. And maybe he's in the room even. Maybe that's how he got in touch with me. But I just realized, like, that's such a huge opportunity of a problem. Huge, huge, huge. And it occurred to me, like, wow, I've never heard of another startup trying to address this. And yeah, so I just, that stuck with me when I thought of like brilliant ideas of like mega trends of where things are going. with social shopping and other big. Anyway, so the next article is from MIT Tech Review. They say they have sources that French officials were in the final stages of buying NSO's Pegasus spyware, but opted not to after claims that French politicians were targeted in July. And we did read that headline in July, that France realized that they were targets of Pegasus. Well, guess what? Everybody is. And yeah, that was a safe assumption. It's just that you actually found out who was. And so the sources were that the French were in the final stages of buying it when they found out that they were being targeted by it. That's kind of a funny, ironic headline there. So French officials were close to buying it. Now the U.S. has sanctioned the Israeli company, and insiders say it's on the ropes. Yeah, on the ropes of Moldova, exactly. In July, accusations emerged that spyware NSO Group had targeted French President Emmanuel Macron, causing a major controversy. The company denied the claims. Part of a sting of allegations about the use of Israeli-backed groups Pegasus spyware, Israel's military officials, meanwhile, rushed to end a diplomatic crisis by meeting with their French counterparts and promising to investigate the charges. At the exact same time, MIT Tech Review has learned French government officials were in the final stages of contract negotiations to purchase Pegasus hacking tools from the NSO. The French were on the verge of buying the tool, which is interesting because that was long after it was publicly exposed. So it's almost as if the French learned about Pegasus in the mainstream media, like everybody else did, and then contacted them and say, hey, we would like some of that. In the type of deal that is typically worth millions of dollars, despite years of allegations that it was regularly being used to surveil and harass dissidents, journalists, and human rights activists. But sources familiar with the deal say that the process fell apart after the accusations that French politicians potentially were among those targeted, and negotiations were broken off just a few days before the sale was set to take place. After publication, France's Ministry of Foreign Affairs denied it was in the process of purchasing NSO Group tools. Another important relationship fell apart earlier this month when the United States sanctioned NSO Group by adding it to its entry list, thereby imposing rigorous rules and regulations on Americans buying from or selling to the Israeli company. The U.S. made the move. So Apple can't sell phones to them. Oh, how will they ever figure out how to improve their spyware if Apple can't sell phones to them? I mean, if they go into an Apple store is going to have to say, are you with Pegasus? Because we're not allowed to sell phones to you. Gotcha. We got you, Pegasus. You're stuck now. We're not ha! Legally, we can't sell you phones anymore. How are you going to develop your software without iPhones, huh? Legally, gotcha. The U.S. made the move because it said NSO was building and selling spyware to foreign governments. Yeah, well, they're very public about that. That's their elevator pitch. Hi, we're NSO Group. We sell spyware to foreign governments. Yeah, and you got them. Boy, did you catch them. It's right on their business card. We sell spyware to foreign governments, and now you're saying, well, we don't like that. Right, okay. So, next up. Apple delays the release of its digital ID feature in the Wallet app for iOS and watchOS until early 2022. Apple recently updated its website to indicate that an upcoming iOS 15 and watchOS 8 feature that will let you add your driver's license or state ID to your watch or iPhone is delayed until 2022. Apple previously said it would launch in late 2021, but now it's coming in early 2022. Okay. Next up is Nikkei Japan says they have sources that Apple has tapped TSMC in Taiwan to mass produce 4-nanometer 5G modem chips for the iPhone in 2023 in an effort to reduce its reliance on Qualcomm. So if you are a Qualcomm shareholder, you might want to start watching that ticker a little more closely. Next up, Decentraland. says it sold a virtual real estate plot for $2.4 million in crypto to tokens.com, a subsidiary metaverse. To tokens.com subsidiary called Metaverse Group, claiming it to be the largest transaction. So now you've got this PR battle between Decentraland and Axie Infinity. I believe Axie Infinity had a $2 million virtual real estate sale, and Decentraland found a clever way to get themselves in the headlines by enabling a $2.4 million sale of virtual land that doesn't exist. I wonder how nice that beach really is.
There's a cobra waiting in that land, I bet.
I want to know, how beautiful is that non-existing beach? Can I grow food in it? Does it have water? I can't wait to tell my Burmese friends about this one. They're going to have a nice little laugh about that one. So the next one is Core Stack, which offers companies AI-powered cloud governance software. Those are big words. AI-powered cloud governance. I have not seen those two words in the same headline before. That's kind of cool. Raises $30 million. The next is a brand new one. It says, a look at the case of former Facebook engineer Badad Esfabad, who was detained in Iran in 2020. The company's response, lessons for Facebook, and more. Among software engineers, Mr. Esfabad is something of a celebrity. He created HarfBuzz, a tool that allows programs to render scripts. Pardon me. A tool that allows programs to render scripts in languages like Persian, and led Google's fonts and text rendering efforts. In 2019, he went to Facebook to work on its internationalization team, earning about $1 million a year. The following year, in January, he traveled to Tehran for what was supposed to be a 2-week trip to visit his family. It became a nightmare. On a Wednesday, he was supposed to meet with friends at a cafe. On his way there, he was approached by 4 officers of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, a branch of the Iranian military tasked with keeping the current regime in power. The U.S. considers this a terrorist organization. The officers served him with a warrant for allegedly cooperating with hostile entities and acting against the security of the Islamic regime. Then they whisked him off to the nearby Evin prisons for political dissidents. He encountered with the IRGC. His encounter with the IRGC threw his life into chaos. He was tortured and spent months afterwards living in fear. In the aftermath, he went public with the story of his capture, which made international news. Unsurprisingly, it made waves within Facebook, according to an internal document leaked as part of the Facebook papers that was initially viewed by more than 5,500 employees. After we saw it, we called him, and he told us the full story of his experience and why he eventually left Facebook. And he described something strange. Not only did Facebook appear to fear Iran, but the Iranian authorities seemed wary of offending Facebook. He says that the IRGC targeted him because of his friendships with activists who've been developing tools to circumvent internet censorship in Iran. And he was placed in solitary confinement for a week, save for 2 sessions of psychological torture and daily 6-hour interrogations. The guards went through most of his devices and downloaded troves of private data from his social media accounts. They also tried to convince him to become an informant and keep tabs on his activist friends once he left Iran. Although the guards tried to present themselves to him as powerful and threatening, they were surprisingly sheepish about anything having to do with Facebook. The guards knew he worked there, but they didn't ask him about his job and were generally wary of getting involved with the company, according to Esfabad. They didn't even touch his company-issued laptop. The guards were more afraid of opening up that laptop Facebook overhearing the room. They didn't even ask me to try to connect to Facebook. After the guards threatened his family and said that they would imprison him for 10 years, he agreed to set up meetings with the activists he knew abroad and report back. They let him go, but he never followed through on the deal. Despite the IRGC's later attempts to contact him through Instagram DMs and WhatsApp, he left Iran and ended up in Lisbon, Portugal, where he had an apartment there. He tried to put his life back together, but his ordeal wasn't over. Facebook had learned of his detention from his wife and friends within 2 days of his arrest. He believes that may have been when the company's Global Security Operations Center shut down his Facebook accounts to prevent infiltration. Following his release, he experienced crippling paranoia and fell into a deep depression he attributes to his bipolar disorder. He felt unable to return to work. His manager initially told him not to worry about it, but Facebook HR informed him after a couple of months that he had run out of vacation days and had to go on unpaid leave. He filed for medical leave, a process in which he says he was repeatedly asked for a date he would return to work. Furthermore, he couldn't reactivate his Facebook accounts without doing so in person in Seattle. So he didn't feel comfortable returning to the U.S. from Lisbon at a time of heightened security of Iranian Americans, because this was shortly after the killing of Soleimani, the military leader of Iran. So America's naturally going to inspect every Iranian who enters America. So he was also worried that not having his social accounts would make it harder, not easier, for him to pass potential border questioning. And to him, he'd been placed in a catch-22. Basically, every interaction I had with Facebook HR was out of tune, was so inhumane. Surprising that that was included in the Facebook papers that was sent to the Wall Street Journal, and yet none of the dozen-plus outlets who had access to this reported it. It's a really interesting story. Next up, Indian government submits a bill to ban most cryptocurrencies and aims to create a framework that would facilitate the creation of a CBDC. And can I get half partial credit on a little I told you so, where I just had a meeting this weekend at lunch on Saturday, to be specific, at Strandbaggen 1, to be very specific, that I met with one of India's largest investors in tech, with whom I'm going to start doing my monthly events in Bangalore starting in January. And he informed me he's incredibly tight with the government and that they're going to be working on a CBDC backed by gold. And now we see the headline today. I did say that in this room that day, Saturday, later that day. I came in because we do the Saturday session. And when I came in the Saturday session, I said exactly that. And so now the headline that India is banning cryptos, that can often mean when a country says they're banning, look at China banned crypto and they did a CBDC. So when India announced 24 hours ago that they were banning crypto, and now the headline today is, oh, what do you know? Oh, what a surprise. It would facilitate the creation of a CBDC. The Indian government submits a bill to ban most cryptocurrencies and aims to create a framework that would facilitate the creation of a CBDC. Wow, what a surprise. What a shock. I wonder if it's going to be backed by gold. Jeez, I wonder. It's just such a crazy, what a while. Who could guess?
It'll be backed by gold for a couple of years, then they'll change
exactly right. Well, yeah, I think you have a good point. However, there was an addition. I suggested, and he acknowledged, that a really clever idea is that it be created in such a way that other countries could connect and directly, so that if India creates this initially, although I'm sure they'd love to have another, like if France, for example, says, we have a bunch of gold too, we could add our gold reserves to this, and we could share this. And then you have cross-border payments between India and France. And then Spain says, hey, we want in on that. We've got some gold too. Okay, great. And then other countries could all pile in together, add their gold reserves to this effort, and have a united central bank digital currency.
That ain't going to happen. I mean, it's a good idea, but I think that governments are more interested in printing soft money for the people and keeping the hard money for themselves.
Well, you had the euro. The euro itself is a sort of multinational currency. And even if you had a digital euro, that would be a multi-state CBDC of sorts, which I understand they're working on something to that effect. So the next one is a startup called Conductor, as usual, misspelled with a K. It starts with a C. The second is Conductor, which provides an all-in-one graphic user interface, or GUI, or GUI as we call it, that simplifies working with Apache clusters, services, and applications. And you really shouldn't care about that unless you're a system admin. So the next one is Resilience, a cyber insurer that also offers policyholders services for defending against ransomware, raises $80 million from General Catalyst. Cyber insurance firm that also helps to shore up policyholders' defenses. Now that's clever, because it's kind of the bundling of the insurance with the solution. I kind of like that. If you've got really good defense, cyber insurance and services for defending against the ransomware. And if you're really confident in your ability to defend it, then all of that insurance money is just free money. I wonder if the insurance policy, it's an insurance policy that includes, that could be a really interesting partnerships between kind of more tech-friendly insurance companies and really good cybersecurity companies could partner in this way. That could be really interesting. It could be a great way for, instead of trying to sell your cybersecurity software to companies, you just go to an insurance company and say, hey, I got a great idea. Let's partner together, and you sell your insurance, and it will include a license of our software. Redistribution deal, they call that. So the next one is Tidal taps DistroKid. So Tidal is the platform born out of Norway, believe it or not. Actually, in many ways, born out of Stockholm, and then through Norway, and then Jay-Z bought it, and then Square bought it. Square, the fintech of Jack Dorsey, bought Tidal. Jay-Z came along with that. DistroKid is Philip Kaplan, affectionately known as Pud in our inner geek circles. And Pud is, interestingly, quite friendly with Jack Dorsey, and actually incredibly friendly with Evan Williams, the other CEO of Twitter. And he was very tight with the Twitter founders, even before Twitter. And for those real old school geeks, you'll remember Philip Kaplan as the brain behind Fucked Company, which was a blog in 99-2000 that documented the collapse of all of the initial IPO, buzziness and bubble, the tech bubble of 99-2000. And that was a really hilarious blog to follow, where it was a bunch of insiders at the companies that were collapsing, revealing that they're going to be collapsing soon. And Philip, aka Pud, made DistroKid because he's a musician. He's very fond of death metal, especially drumming. And so he made DistroKid. DistroKid is itself now a unicorn. And now Tidal taps DistroKid and others to offer direct artist payments, where 10% of a user's Hi-Fi Plus subscription goes to their most listened artists. So check this out, y'all. This is changing the game fundamentally. And where's Gareth? Is Gareth in the room? Gareth, get your hand up. And where's Sarah? So let's get Sarah and Gareth. This is right up your alleys, y'all. There he is. And where's... Sorry to all the friends in the audience. Hey, Gareth.
Oh, hello.
Hey,
Hi.
did you see this headline about Tidal and DistroKid?
I did. It popped up a couple of days. It actually popped up a couple of days ago. Yeah, it's super interesting. There's a couple of streaming services now doing these direct artist payments.
Right,
Um,
because this is the main criticism that idiots aim at Spotify, which is that Spotify is not paying artists, right? So in this sense, it says if you're subscribed to Tidal's Hi-Fi Plus plan, which costs $20 a month, 10% of your monthly subscription fee, so $2, will be distributed to your most listened to artists, so long as that artist uses DistroKid, which of course they will all sign up for that so that they get that money. The percentage shrinks if you're paying for your subscription through a service that takes a cut, like Apple or Google. Tidal told TechCrunch that it also struck similar deals with independent distributors like CD Baby, as you were saying, Gareth, Stern, Symphonic, TuneCore, NVIDIA.
yeah, it's super interesting, like watching all the companies make changes. There's an argument that I don't fully understand that's been a big pushback against the adoption of this model because it's been talked about for a long time because there are certain edge cases where certain artists, not necessarily big artists either, are possibly disadvantaged from this in the model. But broadly speaking, it's got to be in some ways a fairer way of distributing, actually distributing revenue, and it's a lot less opaque from an artist point of view because one of the big challenge, if you are an artist, you talked about this before, when you know if the parties looking after your income streams in are basically, you know, bank, payout, and accountant. It's very hard to actually understand where you are in terms of the actual pay revenue flows. And I think it's very difficult to be able to look at something and go, well, I've had this many streams. How much money am I actually going to make? It's virtually impossible for most artists to actually really understand what they're going to get, and what they get is this, you know, effectively a penny per stream average rate, which doesn't make a lot of sense to them. So yeah, this is a big step, I think, in the right direction. I think all these distribution companies certainly are going to be super pleased because this really does make the use of the kind of services and running through these artist service and distribution companies a lot more transparent and a lot more useful for artists. And at the moment, the majority of music coming through pretty much distribution on most platforms is running through these services. So this is I think it's a good thing. So it's going to be really interesting to watch. I think there'll be more of it. I think it'll become the norm across most platforms.
Okay.
Tyler,
Yes.
do you think these platforms are also, these distribution channels of these platforms are realizing that the crypto decentralization or the decentralization of certain industry verticals will impact them being able to continue as they are because they could become irrelevant?
I'm sorry, I was juggling multiple thoughts simultaneously. What? Say that again.
Basically, that the platforms would feel like they're becoming irrelevant by all that's happening in the decentralized crypto space, that they would have to shift their way of doing business, or else they could become irrelevant by the whole decentralization process. Because the most opaque thing.
I don't think that. I think they see it as an opportunity. I'm imagining. I'm totally guessing. I've not had this conversation, but I have to imagine that Spotify and the likes, and in Tidal, are, and particularly Tidal, are thinking about how to use NFT, their platforms, the Tidal platform, the Spotify platform, as an NFT platform for artists to take back kind of ownership of of their content. Because for those who don't know, artists don't own their content generally. The successful ones. The irony is, unsuccessful artists do own their content because a big vampire company hasn't approached them and kind of tricked them into signing a really bad deal. And I'm speaking from personal experience here. So that could be, I think in the long-term future, 30 years from now, artists will go onto platforms, and Spotify will be much more like YouTube. Not with video, I don't mean that. What I mean is the content creator uploads the content, they get a bunch of listens, they get paid. And then the platform puts in ads between the content if they want. People can pay to remove the content. And this was already happening on Spotify. Spotify already has the ads, and you can already pay to remove the ads. YouTube is the same business model there. And I think the idea is that why can't musicians get a weekly check from Spotify the same way that YouTube creators do? And then how could and then I think they're thinking, I think that's in the inevitable future, and also how will NFTs fit into that?
I have two questions.
Yeah.
Who owns the content once you load up to YouTube? And then secondly, for Tidal, do you see the artist owning new songs going forward, or is it a backwards thing?
That you just raised an interesting question. Will the platforms force exclusivity? So will YouTube demand, okay, well, if you upload it to us, then we own it, or will Spotify do that, or will Tidal do that? Because as a content creator, you want to participate on as many platforms as possible. And if one of them starts asking for exclusivity, generally that'll happen if they get a really strong position in the market where they can trick people into doing that. As of yet, I don't think anyone's doing that.
I think exclusivity in music has it's been tried multiple times. It's kind of largely failed every time and then disappeared into the background, regardless of who's been, brokering those deals. Largely, I just don't think there's the culture amongst music and music fans to kind of sort of tolerate it in the way that, say, movies we're used to kind of this idea of, windowing and the way things get released. Music's never really had it, and I think the general consensus always ends up the people that lose out are music fans, and en masse, really, artists and managers, particularly, they're very protective of that particular relationship. So I think it always tends to fall out of favor because the quick check sort of always pales into insignificance versus like the overall thoughts of how do we kind of look after the fans or monetize around the fan base that's associated with an artist. So I think the exclusivity bit disappears, but the YouTube question is really interesting because there is a thing where you upload content and they have certain rights to use it. I do wonder at what point they start becoming, that point between distribution and content platform gets so close that, who the rights owner is or under what conditions the platform is allowed to operate those rights is going to become super interesting if it gets closer and closer to the artist. So that's a really interesting point, and I don't know where that's going to go.
Oh, James in the audience might have a take on this from LA. And welcome back, James. If you have a thought on this, the floor is yours. And sorry, I remember last time you were here, I meant to give you the floor, and I did, and I noticed you had jumped out right when I did. So, next up, a core AI, spelled again misspelled with a K, KORE. .ai, which helps companies make AI assistants like Alexa and Siri with low-code tools, meaning you don't need to have a degree in computer science to make one of these AI assistants. Raises $73.5 million from a bunch of investors, most notably NVIDIA itself is an investor, and that's very, very interesting. And I wonder if Jean-Francois on stage with us, because Jean-Francois is a real leader in this space of AI assistance with his startup called Leah 27. But it seems he's not with us today. Okay. So Cheryl, if you remind me, because he'll probably join us in our next session.
Okay, I'll pin him later.
Okay. The next one is Luma Health, which helps healthcare providers centralize and automate scheduling and communication with patients raises $130 million. And that makes all the sense in the world. And you're going to see for the next 10 years, especially in the next 3, just an insane amount of funding into these healthcare, like digitization of healthcare, startupization of healthcare, the same way that we've seen it for the last 10 years with the banks and fintech. And here comes, now that fintech's reaching a more mature stage, you're now going to start to see tons of similar, a new era of, we're already seeing it. And the really interesting part that the mainstream media isn't yet reporting and causing misinformation about, no doubt they will, is that Apple and Amazon and Google are all incredibly focused on healthcare in huge ways. And we read those headlines every day as well. So the next one is startups like Royal, which help musicians create and sell NFTs, MA, could potentially upend predatory record deals and further shift power to artists and fans. And that's the whole point of that startup from Justin Blau. He had this startup called Royal. He raised the first round a few months ago, and now there was a recent announcement of a follow-up round. And he himself, as an artist that he is, deserves a lot of credit for pioneering doing music through NFTs, which he did here in Clubhouse.
Yeah, he released his single as an NFT, and it was super successful at 11 million. And I think this is also why Blau's, I was actually in the room. I was actually in the room when he was doing it, and he was talking to everyone because Paris and Hilton and him are good friends, and they were both in the room, and we were talking about NFTs, and he was super excited. And I was there when he dropped the album, and I saw how like the community really rallied and was super supportive. It was really powerful to see that. I think it was definitely a stake in the ground to understand the power of community, and also to understand like NFTs are going to be driven by the engine of community. Because if they don't have that engine of community, they can fall by the wayside. And quite frankly, yeah, they can be used for nefarious money laundering. Absolutely. Because the reality is that if the NFT community is strong, they'll be aware of that. They'll be present to that it could come into the occurrence, right, Tyler? They would be more proactive about saying, okay, well, where's all this big money coming from a certain country, right? Where is it really legitimate? Can we check it? Can we not check it? And they can check it, but I think, as I think Ken and Craig and a few others have said about the space being super exciting because the green-eyed monster's out in a lot of people's eyes, like a lot of people's eyes. And Blau just kind of took initiative with the money that he raised, and clearly he put it to good use. And now he's taking the second step in that journey. And he's taking people with him, Tyler. He's taking people with him, which I think is really, people are talking really, really highly of him as an artist. But look, it's like the gentleman, Greg Norman with the Sharks, remember? He knew nothing about business, nothing. He was only a golfer. Is it Greg Norman that was a golfer? He was only a golfer. That's it. He didn't know shit from Shinola about running a business. But he taught himself. He taught himself and then made a massive global fashion brand around his shark. So the point, case in point, is that sometimes the creatives can't do the business because they don't understand it and it's not in their jam, in their toolkit. But it doesn't mean that Blau has not just bought himself up to skill set. You know what I'm saying? And that, I think, is what I find really commendable as we go into these new ways of doing business, that I think people now are going to have to pull their big girl, big boy pants up and start to really stop relying on other people to do stuff and take responsibility for learning things so that you could navigate it and you could have a clear understanding when taking those business decisions that may need more of your input. And you might not have that expertise in your toolkit, but it doesn't mean you can't get some of it to make a decision or to at least ask the right people.
Yeah. Well, more and more as music is getting more digitized and the act of creating music is also getting more and more digitized, that musicians are becoming quite geeky and very familiar. And it's there's a whole lot of hardware and software involved in music creation. So it's not surprising that musicians oftentimes become very geeky, like Blau clearly has, especially in the EDM space, which he is part of. So the missing element. So it's not a surprise that he would be interested in geeky stuff and tech and NFTs. The tricky part is the business side, as you said. There's oftentimes with very successful artists, somebody in the band, and Lars and Metallica comes to mind, for example, or Gene Simmons from Kiss, and there's many, many, many examples where somebody in the band does have some kind of business sense, and it seems Blau might have a bit of that as well.
That's so funny you mentioned Gene Simmons from Kiss, because they're in process, I believe, of doing an NFT. So it's super wild that you mentioned it. Gene Simmons actually is collected Cardano, and he's super excited about the space recently.
The first time I ever heard of Cardano was from Gene Simmons. So.
I know, which I thought was really funny, because you do have these what I was going to say about what you just commented on, as music gets digitized. EDM is super popular, and digitizing music is as well. But then my question becomes, what happens to our more traditional vehicles of music and classical instruments and classical pieces? And that's one of the reasons why I'm literally in conversation with a composer to make their composition of their ballet as an NFT that will be similar to what Beeple did, how it would still keep on giving and it still keeps on morphing. And this ballet will be having other episodes and scenes added to it over the course of its time that the person holds the NFT. So the engagement is that they hold the NFT to see the complete ballet. They can't sell the NFT, because if they sell the NFT, they lose the access to seeing the ballet complete, which I think is really powerful when you're talking about a use case for traditional composed music, where it would be a score for a ballet or a theater piece or an opera. So yeah, I think it's really fascinating, the space, for sure.
I think
I just also wanted to add, if I can, it doesn't surprise me at all for someone like Gene Simmons to do. I worked with Doc McGee, which is part of the their management, for many years, and it is, these are the people that are not afraid of taking the first steps. I mean, back in the day, it would have been the biggest no-no to actually do sponsorships and to sell, a product or be behind a product's name. That was a big no-no in the music business, which now completely is the opposite. So for someone like Gene to come in and start saying, getting involved with NFTs or anything new for that matter, or even with Metallica and the guys. So anything that's new, these are people that are not afraid to take a step forward to try and do something new, as if they're not going to be ridiculed if it doesn't work out. So these normally are the same kind of people that take the first steps, and on the big stage, and then these are the ones that are going to wind up getting success. And to go back, Tyler, to what you guys were talking about when I jumped back in, was that in today's world, you can flex your muscle by trying to get yourself in situations where you're non-exclusive. So exclusivity is something that everybody wanted back in the day, but today's atmosphere, you flex your muscle by setting up contracts and agreements, not being exclusive to anything, because people have more power now as an independent. I'm working with right now one of the biggest independent hip hop stars in the US, and you flex your power not being exclusive. So I think in today's market, not being exclusive is actually the goal or the place to go. So it's interesting times for me to kind of see how it's going. Completely the opposite of what it used to be maybe 10, 15 years ago.
I think one of the other things I just want to add was just moving it back slightly. The thing that's really interesting about Blau being involved in driving this stuff, and I think we need more of it, is uh, the technology, to the point about the geeky stuff and geeky musicians driving this, for adoption. There's something really interesting about music and music artists being involved in this space, driving adoption, and making it more straightforward and simple and accessible for artists to get involved in, but then also from consumer adoption of the technology, which will probably be a little less geeky than it is right now if it's going to actually fly. So I think there's a reciprocal thing here about, I think music is quite a powerful tool for anyone that wants to actually look at driving adoption for this technology, and then there's obviously a I think just from the conversation we had today, there's like right now we talk about NFTs, but I mean, essentially there's a plethora of use cases now under those three letters that are being applied in different bits of the music industry and around artists and creators. So, it's going to be, interesting watching them play out, but I think, more musicians and more artists directly involved in that stuff is going to really help drive things forward. So, I think Blau definitely deserves to be celebrated, and hopefully there's going to be a lot more along those lines. I think in that round, I don't know if it's in that article, but Andreessen Horowitz is, I believe, an
Investing in that.
investor
Yeah,
in Royal as well. So that's
correct.
there's a big interesting signal. They did a blog post or podcast, I think, this week on actually on investing in Royal and what they were thinking and doing it. So that's worth checking.
Okay, thanks for that. And next we get into where did we leave off here? There we go. Here it is. So the next one is UK-based mental health provider Leso or ISO raises 53 million as it plans to use real-life therapy sessions data to fuel AI-powered text-based therapy. And that's remember when I was just talking about the issue of the pitch I got yesterday of how to address the new reality of declining birth rates and people not dating or having sex and etc. This is kind of similar, actually. This one is in the mental health, armed with unprecedented. So they're using, it says UK-based digital therapy company. It's spelled with an I, IESO, announces $53 million and creating more intuitive, autonomous text therapy. In other words, AI trained on thousands of hours of real-life therapy that can provide personalized sessions over chat. So you could have a virtual text therapist, or you could have a virtual sex therapist. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So this is going to become a thing because there's a headline coming up in a minute about, here it is. I'll just jump to this one right now because they're totally related. It's from Saudamini, found this one. I just tweeted it out, and it says, artificial intelligence has reached a point where it can compose text that sounds so human that it dupes most people into thinking it was written by another person. These AI programs, based on what are called autoregressive models, are being successfully used to create and deliberately spread everything from fake political news to AI-written blog posts that seem authentic to the average person and are published under human-sounding names. However, though autoregressive models can successfully fool most humans, their capabilities are always going to be limited, according to research from Whiting's School of Engineering Department of Computer Science. Quote, our work reveals that some desired qualities of intelligence, for example, the ability to form consistent arguments without errors, will never emerge with any reasonably sized, reasonably fast autoregressive model. And human professionals it says the research shows that autoregressive models have a linear thought process that cannot utilize reasoning because they are designed to very quickly predict the next word using previous words. This is an issue because the models are not built to backtrack, edit, or change their work the way humans do when writing something. Human professionals in all fields do this. The final product may display spotless work, blah, 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 blah. So somebody's making the argument that there will be a hard limitation to AI-generated text, but I would argue they're going to find ways around that. So, yeah, there's going to be startups getting funded now for virtual therapists via text, virtual sex chats via text, virtual lots of stuff, all kinds of stuff. So the next one is Outbrain announces $55 million acquisition of Video Intelligence, an ad tech company that matches video with text content. And Verbit, which offers voice transcription services using AI and freelancers, raises $250 million. Japan is allocating $5 billion to support semiconductor manufacturing. Peak PEEK, spelled correctly. Well done. Which offers tools to manage tours and activities, raises 80 million. A Budapest-based company called Bitrise, which helps companies build and operate mobile apps, raises 60 million. And Nikkei Japan has done some analysis that out of 590, that there have been a total of 597 VC firms have invested in India this year. Nearly 600. That's a shit ton. With 211 of them making their debut in the country in 2021. Hedge funds spent over $4 billion in 2021, which is up 3x from last year. So here comes a ridiculous, unbelievable mountains of money flowing into India. And that might have something to do with why I'm starting my monthly events there in January. Maybe, just maybe. Anyway, so Sao Paulo-based buy now, pay later startup called TruePay raises 32 million. And there we go. Those are your boring headlines that your cousins and coworkers will talk about next week. But we have the tweets that our friends in the stage and in the audience are sharing, like this one from Johan in Sweden, and he's a cybersecurity dude. And he found this article that, oh no, let's do this. Okay. Let's play our favorite show called Tech News Jeopardy. Here we go. It's a perfect opportunity. Messi's on stage. Here we go, Messi. Let's show everybody what the magic of Messi. How many Android phones are currently hacked?
72%.
I want an actual number, like how many, not percentage.
I would say 500,000.
2
billion.
billion. 2 billion. Well, wait. You said Android cell phones, right, that are currently in existence or that are sold? So you have to clarify, Tyler.
How many Android devices are infected with a malware? Well, a Trojan.
You know what?
Yeah.
I would say like 500 million actually.
You know what? I can't properly ask the question because now that I read the article, the headline's a bit misleading. This is specifically Huawei's phones. How many Huawei phones have Trojans installed on them? And Huawei is not at all of the Android phones. So the headline
10 million. 15 million.
Huawei phones.
All of them. All of them, they're on a mission.
Exactly. I'd say all of them are on a mission.
Yeah.
I'd have to agree with that.
Yeah.
All
Hi,
your,
Ame.
all
Hello.
your Huawei's are belong to us.
Yeah. I'm giving the point to Craig because the article says 9.3 million and he said 10 million. But you're right. Not only it's very likely that Huawei's phones are all vulnerable because Xiaomi, somebody sent me an article yesterday, 12 hours ago when we met last, about why the price of Xiaomi phones are so unbelievably cheap is because they are all hacked by the government, and they had the receipts to prove it. So, you know, that joke or that reply, as funny as it is, isn't entirely a joke. So
I think that's true of just about every phone, actually.
the next one is from the BBC that Ethiopia's Tigray conflict, foreigners are being advised to leave. Germany and France are the latest countries to advise citizens to leave as the UN relocates its own staff out of Ethiopia as the conflict. From what I was following a little bit of this today with the help of our friend from Ethiopia who happens to join us on stage every day, who, because of the nature of all of this, we're not going to turn this into a Q&A. It's getting very serious, and our thoughts and prayers are with our dear friend Messi. And hope she stays very safe and everything works out. But not only are foreigners advised to leave, there's other news where one of the leader who won the Nobel Prize a couple of years ago is now saying he's going to lead the battle against the Tigray rebels, and they are apparently just 100 kilometers from Addis, which is the capital, and it's getting very serious. And he's told citizens to stand up and take their whatever ammunitions they might have and defend the capital. So, yeah, it's a very going to be looks like going to be very tense there in Addis, in the capital, very shortly, and that's why a lot of people are fleeing, and governments are telling their citizens to flee. So I hope I got all that right. If I got any of that wrong, feel free to correct me. Yeah, but Craig, you sent in one from NASA. You want to cover that one real quick?
I'm not an expert in this area. Let me start by saying that, but I think that the U.S. has sent up, I don't know if the right word is missile, to try to intercept an asteroid instead of a spaceship. So it's about protecting the Earth.
To
Yeah.
knock it off course, just to see if they can do that the way they predict to. And this is actually important for planetary protection because we don't know all of the asteroids or bodies that could potentially hit the Earth and cause problems.
Yeah, so they're
That
targeting. Oh, go ahead.
it was fascinating. I covered it yesterday in the news and the technology they're using to charge the missile. I mean, this mission is amazing, really high tech, very powerful technology. That's the solar, the power of solar, power that they're harnessing, and the carbon fiber and retractable panels that were used. I'm really excited about that part because then that means that new technology can be used here, and they're just trying to slightly move one of the smaller asteroids so it can go and impact the larger one to change the course. So very fascinating.
Okay. Next tweet I have.
I've
Go ahead.
got one real quickly for
Go ahead.
you. It's a Time magazine interview with Henry Kissinger and Eric Schmidt of Google about a book that they wrote together concerning the dangers posed by AI. I did read it. I saw the tweet actually after this room started, and I was reading through it. It is actually rather thoughtful on both their parts. Both of them say things that are a little bit surprising coming from each of them. And they do mention, or it does go into various ways that AI could turn out to be harmful, both through weaponization, but also through influence of the course of political and other events. An interesting approach that Kissinger suggested was that we need to develop a philosophical framework to try and be the context for the ways we try to address this. I tagged you in the tweet, or I tagged Tech News around the world in the tweet, so you can find it.
How long ago was that?
Within the last 45 minutes, I think.
I'll try and find that. So Saudamini sends in this one. Crypto mining in Texas may demand 5 times more electricity in just 2 years. Many Texas residents have linked this energy consumption process of Bitcoin mining to the electricity outages they have to put up with in Texas. And it could get a whole lot worse. And on a related note, I saw a headline in the past 12 hours that says Sweden is working to ban crypto mining, And they're even going one step further. They're trying to influence the rest of the EU to ban crypto mining. Craig, did you see that headline?
Yeah, this has been going on for a few days. We have a minister here, and he has taken this stance against crypto. And interestingly enough, the firm that he quotes discredited him, Vattenfall, the
Energy
power
company.
company here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's definitely some anti-crypto people within the government here, and they are trying to influence the EU as a whole. And I sort of see it as a likely coordinated effort. I mean, starting with the ECB and the Federal Reserve. So I think, it's going to be over the next several years, India today, but, there's going to be more and more governmental attacks as government officials wake up to the fact that they're not going to be able to spend money. Today, Sweden wants to increase the pension fund payouts. Where are they going to get that money from? Well, this whole thing is going to make it more difficult for politicians to do that in the future, and they're going to wake up to it and try to attack it more.
Tyler,
Okay.
I just want to say that there are only about 6 coins that are being actually mined with proof of work. With proof of stake and proof of history and proof of this, that, and the other, or directed acyclic graphs. That stuff is not very energy, intensive. And of the 6 coins, Ethereum is number 2, and they're moving to proof of stake in the next whenever. And once they do, there's not a whole lot left. It's basically Bitcoin, a little bit Dogecoin, LTC, Bitcoin Cash, and another Bitcoin fork, none of which are really very significant right now. So I think if you're against crypto, go forth and be, but it's really not mining that's going to be the issue.
I think that's a good point, and a reason why why a Bitcoin maximalist would want these other coins to be in the market, like Ethereum, to offset the risks of an attack on the computer network. And the other point I would make is, you hear all this FUD about how much energy Bitcoin takes up, and it's true, it does take up a lot of energy, but one transaction can hold the world's wealth. And one transaction can pay essentially unlimited amounts of people or companies. So you really need to look at the function that it's doing and the amount of wealth that is stored compared to other alternatives in the fiat world.
There's a center in Cambridge in the UK that tracks energy usage for these things. And their calculations say that the energy usage is about the size of Netherlands, which is on the face of it pretty grave, except that it's a very small fraction of the world energy. And it's rapidly moving to green energy because there's an incentive to do so. It's rapidly moving to the kind of energy that can be reharnessed, like with liquid cooling, where you get the heat back and redistribute it elsewhere. It's moving to flared gas, which is going to be wasted anyway if you don't use it. And then you also have to remember that when you're burning energy creating Bitcoin, that's essentially your factory. You're creating value that's been going up on the order of 100% a year. It's not wasted. Whereas if you charge your Tesla and drive it, that is gone. It's turned into heat.
Yeah.
Just saying that there are different parts. Yeah, go ahead.
In the friend of mine who had one of the largest crypto mines, the largest in Europe, one of the largest in the world, Sam Cole, he sold that heat to the city where the factory was in Sweden, so they reutilized
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
Yeah. So
I don't think, Anyway, it's more complicated than that, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think also, as we saw with China, where they banned crypto, they have their CBDC. The headlines today, India's planning putting policies in place to ban all cryptos simultaneously to plans to launch their own CBDC. And I imagine that these things are often have strings attached in ways that aren't obvious, where and China did go after the crypto mining.
They did. Well, China had like 2/3 of the mining, so it was
Yeah,
a really big deal at some
yeah.
point. And all of that took on the order of a couple of months to redistribute. And in fact, Bitcoin mining now is more decentralized than it was before because the number one country now is the US and number two is Kazakhstan. One could argue that Kazakhstan shares a border with China, so you could just throw them in a truck and drive them across. And they've got, natural gas and coal and this and that and the other that can do that. But that's where that is right now. And the US is now the number one place for Bitcoin mining.
On a related note, that's and Jeannie in the audience sent in this one that from China, that China's Hainan to step up testing of the digital yuan and cross-border payments. If the application scenarios continue to expand, overseas visitors may directly exchange foreign currencies into digital yuan. Yeah, exactly. That's actually that has been for a long time now the exact plan of the Olympics. And it's why China was rushing to get this ready for the Olympics so that people could, when they arrive, use the digital yuan. But now people aren't going to be arriving. It's going to be a virtual Olympics. So, but indeed, that's been the plan all along. So, Ellie, I found your article from Time about Henry Kissinger's last crusade, stopping dangerous AIs. The former U.S. Secretary of State speaks during a National Security Commission on AI conference on November 5th, 2019. It's when he started this campaign. At the age of 98, Henry Kissinger has a whole new area of interest, artificial intelligence. He became intrigued after being persuaded by Eric Schmidt, who was then the executive chairman of Google, to attend a lecture on the topic. While at the Bilderberg conference in 2016, the two have teamed up with the dean of MIT Schwarzman College of Computing, Daniel Hottenlocker, to write a bracing new book called The Age of AI about the implications of the rapid rise of deployment of artificial intelligence, which they say augurs a revolution in human affairs. The book argues that AI processes have become so powerful, so seamlessly enmeshed in human affairs, and so unpredictable that without some forethought and management, the kind of epic-making transformations they will deliver may send human history in a dangerous direction.
Tyler?
Yes.
Yeah, Eli is off stage. I back channeled him.
Okay.
There's actually an article on Henry Kissinger in 2018 where that book is the premise for on the Atlantic, where he actually, it's called the End of Enlightenment, the End of the Age of Enlightenment, where he laid out, it was basically an expose in the Atlantic, where he laid out the dangers of AI. And I think Eric Smith picked up on this and they put it in the book. But, they're just kind of saying that he came aboard fast and that this could really be utilized. And I haven't seen the book or got the book yet, but from what Eli's point, when we were back channeling, this could be where, the AI dark age, we're talking more like AI weaponization.
Yeah.
So if you're weaponizing AI for fighting wars and missiles, and China did just launch a rocket that circled the globe, quite interesting, and then launched another rocket off of that back in about a month ago or 2 months ago in August, and our DoD is still dealing with that. So it's about if these things are autonomous and deep tech AI can do it, then what dangers do we have? Because there's no diplomacy. And I think that's what the book heads into. That's all.
Cool. Well, Eric Schmidt, former chairman of Google, came to Stockholm 2016 to speak at my friend's event, Brilliant Minds, the same one that Obama came to in 2018. And it's a tiny little event, but I remember when Eric was on stage, that whole issue came up. I forget who was interviewing him, but they asked him. It was just a fireside chat on stage, and the person asking the questions, it might have been Natalia Brzezinski, actually, and I believe she asked him what what do you think of Elon Musk and his take on AI? And Eric, at that time, 2016, 2 years before, that Atlantic piece, and 3 years before this Brandenburg event, and but Eric was incredibly dismissive of Elon's fears of AIs. I mean, this event is intentionally kind of off record and everything, but he was like, yeah, Elon doesn't know anything about AI, and we know everything about AI at Google, and we're the experts, and this is ridiculous. I mean, he didn't say it's ridiculous, but I mean, he was basically in saying that it's ridiculous that all of this fear mongering, and there's nothing to worry about it, it's all good, and blah 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 blah. So interesting to see that Eric might have turned the course a bit.
Yeah. And just quick note on that is a convergence that has happened, and we talk about this, and even in crypto, as you mentioned, NVIDIA and other chips and GP3s, you're talking about a convergence of hardware and software, and then quantum leaping on certain levels that can create something, that we all have to be always mindful of. So that's, I think in 2016, Eric was looking at a silo from Google's approach and data and search and so forth, and certain hardwares having come online at that point. Now they're here. And so I think there's a change in the game.
So James in the audience confirms that it was Natalia Brzezinski who asked the question on stage with Eric. And I guess James also remembers his response as being rather like really downplaying the dangers of AI. So the next one, it's from the BBC, that Albert Einstein's relativity document sells for a record $13 million. The manuscript shows Einstein's attempts to formulate his theory of relativity. And what else? Fake social media profiles targeting Sikhs have been exposed. According to the BBC, a total of 80 accounts have been suspended following a report into the network, which I am imagining this would be Facebook and Twitter. Let's see. A new report shared exclusively with the BBC ahead of its publication on Wednesday identified 80 accounts in the network. What network? Have now been suspended because they are fake, right? The influence operation used accounts across Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to promote Hindi nationalism and pro-Indian government narratives. The aim of the network appears to have been to alter perceptions on important issues around Sikh independence, human rights, and values, according to the report's author. There's no evidence linking this network directly with the Indian government, which has yet to respond to a BBC request for a comment. The network used so-called sock puppet accounts, which are fake ones controlled by real people posing as independent individuals rather than as automated bots. The fake profiles used Sikh names and claimed to be quote-unquote real Sikhs. They used the hashtag real Sikh to endorse and hashtag fake Sikh to discredit different political viewpoints, etc. Yeah, well, 80 accounts is that's unfortunate, but yeah, that means you could have had 3 people doing that on a social network. Okay, so that's very unfortunate, but interesting that it got the BBC's attention. The next one is a really interesting one. We've seen this before, but this is kind of an update about adding an extra thumb, a robotic third thumb, to a hand. And we've seen this where people are adding these robotic thumbs to their hands. And now a pianist has learned to play with the robotic third thumb in just 1 hour. Pianists equipped with a third robotic thumb were able to adapt to using the extra digit after just 1 hour of practice. Imperial College research has found. That's kind of fantastic, especially for pianists. Especially for pianists who play pieces by Franz Liszt and other incredibly difficult. Flight of the Bumblebee comes to mind, or even Boogie Woogie, where you have to do these really long stretches with your hand to hit these octaves and stuff. So that could be. I'm looking forward to the first concert with a pianist who employs one of these. And let's get a guitarist an extra middle finger or two. That would be interesting. So Match.com's CEO is in the headlines here, and Saudamini sends this one in. It says Match's CEO fist bump with Tinder founder sparks bullying claims. Let's see what this is about, and does it involve my buddy Sean Rad, who himself is ensnared in a bit. It is about my friend Sean Rad and the lawsuit that he's been going through, which I've been very quiet about because he and I are buddies, and he, this has not been very public. So it says the way Match Group bought Tinder, by the way, and the Match Group chairman and chief executive officer Greg Blatt tells it, he hadn't seen Tinder founder Sean Rad in years, and even though they were now on opposite sides of a multi-billion-dollar trial, he wanted to say hello. What happened next during a break in Blatt's testimony Monday injected fresh drama into the question of whether Match and its controlling shareholder, IAC, Interactive Corp., cheated Rad and other Tinder executives out of billions of dollars by lowballing the dating app's 2017 valuation by $10 billion. Quote, he came down and grabbed me very hard, Rad told New York State Court Judge Joel Cohen. I was a little blank, but that was absolutely designed to intimidate me, Rad's lawyers said. Blatt crossed the line by squeezing and pulling their client's arm while remarking that he had been lifting, but that it was in keeping with how the CEO had bullied and intimidated others during the valuation process. Blatt told the judge he merely reciprocated when Rad put out his hand for a fist bump and saw the gesture as an indication of some level of civility despite the dispute. In a statement issued Tuesday, Match accused Rad and his co-plaintiffs of trying to turn a breach of contract case into a circus by smearing witnesses rather than focusing on the facts. The judge declined to allow Rad's lawyers to question Blatt about the encounter in front of the jury, but he warned Blatt not to make further contact with the plaintiffs or their lawyers. The exchange is illustrative of the combative nature of the trial, which just entered its third week and is expected to come through December 3rd. The defendants claim the Tinder executives cashed out their options for more than $700 million, and Match said it is in its Tuesday statement that Sean Rad received more than half of that. Quote, Sean Rad was not satisfied with his $400 million, so he's come back for more and will stop at nothing to get it, the company said. On the stand Monday, Blatt denied trying to steer the $3 billion valuation, which he said was similar to the amount the Wall Street analysts had estimated. Rad claims that Tinder was actually worth $13 billion at the time. Quote, every quarter they published reports, Blatt said of the analysts. They valued Tinder at $3 billion, the same thing that the banks did after I went in and supposedly told them all these negative things. Blatt said he and Rad had worked together for many years during the early years of Tinder, which was developed during a hackathon at an incubator partially owned by IAC. While they didn't always agree, they had, quote, developed a certain amount of trust, although they, quote, drove each other crazy, Blatt said. The two had negotiated an agreement in 2014, giving Rad and a group of early Tinder employees 20% of the upstart company. But as the time came to assess the stake in 2017, Rad hired Jefferies Financial Group to advise him on the process, and the relationship soon broke down, Blatt said. Rad and the Jefferies bankers were trying to play hardball and set a bunch of traps in order to guide the banks that had been hired to assess Tinder to peg its worth at $4 billion or more, rather than its actual value as a public company, Blatt said. Quote, it was clear to me at that point that the quest to find the right answer for how much Tinder was worth had been abandoned, and the mission now was to get to that $4 billion by any means possible, although those means would wreak havoc in the company, etc. So I will tweet this one out. I didn't, there's still 2 more paragraphs to go. But when it gets resolved, I will have Sean come in and comment. Sean has come into Tech News Around the World here, actually, on multiple occasions and hung out in the audience without anyone much knowing. But it'll be interesting.
The thing
But
that strikes me about it, Tyler, is like if I was to come and fist bump you, and then I was to like grab you, it just seems like polar. It's not a very to pull your arm and to put pressure on it. It just doesn't seem like a reciprocation of the same gesture. Is the first thought.
Well,
I don't
the
know.
funny thing
Whereas
is he doesn't exactly deny it, and mentioning that, well, he fist bumped me first, so I thought I could grab his arm, and then it gets weird. By the way, these things, unfortunately, when billions of dollars get involved, the things get a little bit crazy at times, especially between big corporates and startups, and usually they don't. Honestly, tech is remarkably good in this regard.
well,
Having been in, having been,
Tyler,
having
for the most part, but
hold on,
the
having
13, where did the 13
LS,
billion come from? Oh, sorry.
having been in the music industry and the fashion industry, I can tell you the tech industry is far better than most. But still, when you get billions of dollars happening during a liquidation event or an acquisition, things can get a little screwy. So I don't know what the 13 billion is about, to be honest. So
Well, and I'm sorry, and I know you can't comment much. I was talking about the public side because I'm only looking at the evolution. And if you look at dating apps and just that trajectory, Match was on its way out, and Tinder was like sort of TikTok is now. It was just trending back then. So, I'm not saying one's right or one's wrong on the other side. It's just intriguing on the fact if you look at that, but you got to negotiate where you negotiate,
yeah,
and
the weird
and
thing
you
is
wonder
this:
why.
normally incubators, for the founders to only have 20% is normally an incubator, and I'm just going off on another side here, just for those who don't know. Normally, when a startup participates in an incubator, the startup gets 90% of the company, and the incubator
Correct.
might get
Yes.
5% of the company. Not
Usually only 1 or 2%.
they can range, but like oftentimes it's sub 10%. Yeah, it can be. Sometimes they're free. Oftentimes they're free. Very often they're free. They don't take equity. Sometimes they take equity. 1, 2, anywhere between 1, 2, 3, 4, sometimes 10. I could even understand in some crazy instances where it could be higher than 10. But we're talking about an example of 80%, where the parent company where this incubator happened, where they incubated this idea, is taking 80%. So yeah, we'll see how it plays out. I'm going to refuse to comment too much. So we're going to pause there because we're now 2 minutes over. And a big thank you to everybody yet again for another fun Tech News Around the World.